Hey everybody, welcome back to the Beyond the Peloton podcast. I'm Spencer Martin, author of the Beyond the Peloton newsletter. I'm joined by my co-host Andrew Vontz from the Choose the Hard Way podcast and the betterlab.io. We are discussing the last weekend of the Tour de France. We'll debate it. I would say very fast climbing stages, impressive performances. I want to pour a little cold water on this talk. These are the best climbing performances of all time. But Andrew, do you want to plug the Better Lab before we get going?
Yeah, Spencer, I would love to do that. I'll tell you what, I've struggled to stop drinking coffee late in the afternoon most of my adult life because I love coffee. I know it negatively impacts my sleep. There's a lot of science that substantiates that. And using the Better Lab, I've been able to successfully shift my caffeine consumption to before noon. So that's one of the things that I've done that's really helping to improve my sleep. That means I feel better when I work out. I'm a more present parent. And I think I'm a bit sharper for things like this podcast, although listeners can judge. So what does the Better Lab do? It helps you to mindfully build science-backed practices to sleep that stick better. And really, it turns your good intentions into actions that last. Like I've always wanted to move my coffee to earlier in the day. Now I'm actually doing it. You can find the Better Lab now in the Apple App Store. You can find our beta there. Please go check it out, download it. It's free. And I'd love to hear what you think about it, what your experience is like, and what feedback you have. You can DM me at HardwayPod, and you can also find us at Better Lab HQ on Instagram.
It's funny to have it just being accountable to the Better Lab. Like it's always wanted me to get to bed earlier, drink wine earlier in the day, and I did it the other day, and I was like, in your face, AI. In your face, app. I couldn't wait to rub it in its face. So it is nice to be accountable to something, whether that be person or artificial intelligence. But Andrew, a little peek behind the curtain. We're recording during stage 17. Can you believe the finish of stage 17? Wow. Insert winner. But I don't know if you're watching it right now.
Yeah.
Really hard start through, looks like actually scorching hot southern France. Big crosswinds, 4-rider group up the road. And then there's a cheeky 48-rider group in pursuit in front of the Peloton. So I'm actually curious to see how this is going to play out. And I talked to Visma rider last night. I was like, hey, you going to go in the breakaway tomorrow? He's like, no, not at all. We're standing around Jonas. Currently, Christophe Laporte and Wout van Aert in the chase group going up to the breakaways. So don't trust anything anyone tells you in professional cycling.
And maybe don't trust me either, because I just gave you the wrong Instagram handle for the Better Lab. It's at the Better Lab HQ. It's the Better Lab HQ, at the Better Lab HQ. You can also find us online. So yeah, come check us out at thebetterlab.io on the internet. But yeah, so you're kicking it with Visma Lisa bike riders. I heard that you were spotting Jonas Abrahamsson in the gym the other day who was benching. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I do have a sore throat, and
is it from air conditioning?
I'm coughing. I tested positive for 8 straight COVID tests. Is that an issue? Should I stop hanging around riders in the Peloton? What is going on with this? Geraint Thomas just has COVID, refuses to leave the race, and then riders in his team keep getting COVID. I wonder where the COVID's coming from, guys. Like, what is happening here?
I mean, it's a survivalist strategy. He wants that podium spot for himself. Carlos Rodriguez, watch out.
What's funny, I was actually saying that my wife and I were debating this the other day. She's like, what's going on with that? That's pretty weird. I'm like, I honestly think it might be if I can keep Carlos from the podium, I'm leader at the Tour next year, baby. Because what did Carlos do for you? But no, on all seriousness, the race has really tightened up. Now, back at stage 6, stage 7, it was loosey-goosey. But, you're high-fiving, you're hugging, you're doing anything you want to the riders in close court. Riders are pulling over and making out with people on the side of the road. It's tightened up. You can definitely tell there's a lot of tension in the Peloton, because if you're in one of these jerseys, if you're on the podium, you're in the top 10, really the only thing that can stop you, if you're any of these riders on the podium, really, or Biniam Girmay, is getting COVID. So a lot of people are super anxious about it. But Andrew, did you watch the cycling this past weekend, stage 14 and 15?
Yeah, I watched a little bit. I think the analogy for what you just described, it used to be like we were at a carnival that rolled into your small town. Now we're at Worlds of Fun.
Yes. Oh boy. That means
for anyone who's from the Midwest, Worlds of Fun, like the premier theme park in the tri-state area there in Kansas City, Missouri.
Don't forget about Oceans of Fun either. The
even better
water park next
with
door.
With a swim up bar.
Yeah, I mean, then there's no illnesses going around there.
No,
don't worry about that. But stage 14, I'm already getting these like combined in my head. Tadej Pogačar won both stages. Stage 14 was slightly easier, longer, less elevation gain. Tough final climb though in the Pyrenees. He wins by 39 seconds over Jonas Vingegaard. His team, UAE, rode hard all day and then did a little trickery at the end. I want to get your take. Was that a little unnecessary? Like instead of just leading out Pogačar for an attack, they have Almeida on the front. Almeida kind of pulls off the front. Adam Yates attacks, which apparently was improvised by Mr. Pogačar himself. And then it puts Wiesmann and Mittelpretzel, and they kind of have to chase him down. And then Pogačar attacks. And Yates goes up to Ben Healy, I believe, in the lead. And then Pogačar attacks up to him, uses him for like maybe 5 seconds, and then drops him and goes. I don't know if that was completely necessary, but it looked cool. That's for sure.
I mean, I thought we were having a reprise of the Jumbo-Visma moment at Vuelta last year. And I thought it was a let the road decide moment. Like maybe Yates decided he was going to win the Tour.
He just gets like a cheeky 10 minutes there. I said before the stage, I was like, whoever wins the stage wins the Tour. I'm putting a ton of money on Tadej because he's going to win this Tour. He's going to win the stage. And then I started to panic like, oh no, Adam Yates is going to float away and win this stage. This is terrible.
Yeah. Did you happen to see the Yates interview, post-race interview right after he crossed the line?
I did.
Man, if you're out there in listener land and you haven't seen that interview, you got to go watch it. If you're wondering if being a climbing domestique is a challenging role and how these guys are feeling in the middle of the race, you got to go listen to the Adam Yates interview, because he basically says, I think he said he was riding at 480 watts trying to hold on to Jumbo during the stage, and he said it's one of the hardest rides he's ever done, just holding on to Visma Lisa bike during the stage. And then somehow he turned himself inside out and nuked it and went up the road, which was not a bad move.
Well, then we get to stage 15, even harder day in the Pyrenees, and Visma takes it up from the gun. We'll debate if this is a good idea or not. But if you look at Derek G's, your coach actually, Zach Nur, wrote a piece for Velo News where he broke down Derek G's power for the whole stage. And if you look at his power numbers on Strava, he's riding at 6 watts per kilo on the 1, 2, 3, 4 climbs before the final climb.
Fingers in the nose. Yeah.
That's not easy. And then at the bottom of the final climb, Matteo Jorgensen is on the front doing like roughly 470 watts, like sustained. And you have to just be able to hold that on the wheel after doing 6 watts per kilo for every climb before that. So if you're out there ripping up your local crit, you're the Dominguez Hills crits, if you're having some good luck in SoCal and you think on the Schwami ride and you think I might be ready to take my talents to the Tour, just go out and do a little 6-hour day where you're doing 6 watts per kilo for 20, 30 minutes, at a time, and then do a little 7 watts per kilo for 40 minutes at the end of that ride and see how you do. And that's what it took. I mean, Jonas Vingegaard attacks. I think it was either Johan Bernil or George Shankappi described it as like once Matteo was done with 10K to go, like Jonas was pregnant. Like there was nothing to do there. Like the decision was made. He had to attack in theory, right? He had to attack. Tadej Pogačar goes with them, sits on his wheel. They're going 15 miles an hour, by the way. So Pogačar's in the wheel, 15 miles an hour on this climb for the first 2/3 of this climb. If you hadn't seen the race, you could tell me exactly what's going to happen. Anytime you pull at that speed with someone in your wheel, they're going to attack you and drop you. I actually think Vingegaard did. But he even confirmed it that this was probably his best climber performance of his career. Finishes 68 seconds behind Pogačar, whose average cadence, by the way, on this climb was 100 RPMs. Holy smokes. That's a lot to hold for that amount of time. And I have a little calculator here. I have him at 447 watts at 64 kilos. So that's 6.98 watts per kilo for 39 minutes, 50 seconds to win that stage. That's a lot. Nur even had him at 453. The thing that I struggled with here was figuring out exactly how much draft he was getting, because at the speeds they're going, you're getting a sizable draft. So I think we're not quite sure what happened there. The thing about the ride is Visma rode that stage as if before the stage, you're like, hey, Tadej, you want to like try to just smash Marco Pantani's record on Plateau de Baie? And he's like, yeah, like, all right, man, we're going to like lead you out all day. You're not going to touch the wind. And then when we get to the final climb, like, oh, this massive 6'4" man is going to ride 500 watts. And then you're going to sit on his wheel. And then our leader's going to go and sit in his wheel and then attack at the very end. And there's no slow parts to climb. And that's kind of how they rode it. And so, you know, when you hear these like, oh, this is the best climbing performance ever, like, people clearly don't know about how bad bikes and tires and tire theory used to be, where you're like running 19 millimeter tires at 120 PSI and you're bouncing off the road. You have that much pressure. There's that much pressure in your tires. And I'm sure the rolling resistance was terrible and the bikes weighed 25 pounds. Like I want to see Jan Ulrich's power data from that 1997 tour. But Andrew, should Jonas have done that? I mean, I guess their theory was that Pogačar's weak if you pile the pressure on him all day, and if we just ride hard enough with him on our wheel, he'll fall away. Does that actually make a lot of sense in retrospect?
I think the main question is what would be the best alternative to what they did? So I don't know. What else are they going to do? Sit on UAE and then try to have someone ultimately. Your only choice is to try to counter the Pog attack. No one on Visma Lease bike other than Jonas has the capacity to do that. So is he quote unquote wasting his team's resources just to have him at front and hold that steady pace? I guess perhaps it stopped Pog from attacking sooner, although thinking about what's unfolded during this race, that it hasn't always worked out well for Pog when he's done the long range attack. And, you know, so I don't know, but that would kind of be my analysis, right?
The reason, I mean, part of the reason these climbing times are so fast, like they're shattering records on these climbs, is because in the olden days, think of like Cadel Evans, runs out of teammates, or even Quintana versus Froome, and they just don't do anything. Just like, I don't know if I want to do this. And they just kind of like start to stall out on the climb. Like, you know, you've seen this before. You've yelled at the TV about this. I do think there was a chance for Jonas to call an audible and say, God, 10K to the top is a long time. You know, maybe do the initial attack. You used to see Contador do this a lot. The initial attack, you don't drop him after 2 or 3 minutes, and then you back off. Because what are the odds that Pogačar is going to sit on your wheel for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then fall off the wheel? And you'd think someone in the team card should have seen. Did you see him sit up and just kind of like open a water bottle, drinking some water, dumping it on him? Like, I feel like the team card should have said, hey, let's dial it back and just try to limit our losses here and make it to the Alps. Because that's how, I mean, it frustrated me like to no end at the time. So I'm happy this happened. But that's how Quintana used to race. It's like, you know, let's minimize losses to Froome. Let's just hope he has a bad day in the Alps or the Pyrenees, whichever mountain range is second. You know, instead of losing 68 seconds, let's lose 20 seconds, 15 seconds, 10 seconds, and just limit our losses until the final 2 days, and then make some push that's never going to work. But everyone's like, oh, wow, he was so close. If he had one more week, he would have won this tour. That's how they used to race. But, you know, as a fan, I'm glad this happened. God, if you and I were trying to race each other and you just sat on the front at that speed, I don't think you'd be shocked if I came around you. That's such a draft advantage.
Yeah, probably not. And then thinking about why did he do that? I think he was trying to keep the pace high enough that Pog wouldn't attack. But of course, Pog's always going to attack, whether he can actually keep the gap after he attacks or not, right? That's just kind of his pattern. So I wonder if what Jonas should have done is just go slower, save a bit of energy, and try to go with the attack. Jonas has really adopted the Geraint Thomas strategy in response to these Pog attacks. I don't know that I've seen anyone else talk about it that way, but that's what Geraint Thomas has been doing his entire career. And that's what Jonas has done when he's been successful and coming back from one of these body blows from Pog in the form of these massive attacks, is just steady, ride, get back up to him, and then continue at that pace. And at that point, sometimes Pog is diminished from being drained from the attack. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that's really the substantive question is, was there any benefit from holding that higher pace and sitting in front. Because I'm sure the thought was, I want to stop him from attacking, because you're not going to,
Yeah, and I mean, so on like the Geraint Thomas strategy, that works if you just think about it from a numbers perspective. Let's say Pogačar attacks, if you're ever riding with someone on a climb and they just attack you, you don't necessarily have to follow them, because that's just an explosive effort. That doesn't matter. What matters is what can they hold. So if someone attacks you going 1,000 watts and then they can hold 150 watts, it doesn't matter. You're going to catch them. If they kind of accelerate a little bit, get a little bit of a gap, and then they're holding 7 watts per kilo, that's an issue. And I think in the past, Pogačar was like explosive attacks and then not able to really hold it. And if you watch these attacks this year, he's not going as hard. He's just doing they're like little punches. Like he was almost done accelerating after 4 or 5 seconds on stage 15. And then he's settling into a super high pace. That's where stuff starts to get dicey for Jonas, because then he's no longer in the draft, right? Pogačar was in the draft.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it distancing Jonas? Jonas is no longer in the draft. That's a big problem. Remco's not worrying about it at all. He's back there, just like, looks fantastic, by the way, riding his own pace, 3 minutes down, not a worry in the world. Going to sew up that podium by 5. Remco is further ahead of 4th place than Pogačar is ahead of Remco. And Pogačar is 5 minutes, 19 seconds ahead of Remco. So Remco's not worrying about any of this. He's just, this is the power I have to ride. I'm going to do it. But that's where stuff started to get dicey for Jonas. And I forgot the second point I was going to make. But
so I'll make another point, because everybody out there, you've been on a climb with somebody who's better than you. You've been attacked on a climb by your buddies, like on a group ride in a race. A strategy that's effective. This used to happen to me all the time. And, I'm certainly not a world-class rider, and I'm a bigger person compared to your average cyclist. And I used to ride with a lot of people that were much smaller than me with more watts. But this applies for amateurs, and it's the same thing that we're seeing play out here. So Pog's pattern is this massive attack. He creates separation, and then typically, on that day, he continued to stretch the gap. But typically, once he creates the separation, he's not going that much faster than Jonas. But the energy cost for Jonas if he were able to immediately respond to the attack and get on Pog's wheel, it's going to be a much lower energy cost than having to close the relatively small gap that is created by the initial attack, because there's so much more wind resistance, because he's going at a much higher speed for that short period of time, if that makes sense. And if you're an amateur out there, when you're riding with your friends, that there are parts of climbs where they're better or worse. For me, I'm thinking of a ride I used to do in Berkeley with my friends a lot, this climb called Tunnel. It has some really steep pitches. That's where it would be really hard for me. And then the lighter people I was riding with, when the grade would get more gentle, I knew if I could just hold steady watts, the same watts that we were riding on the steep part, I could ride that on the flat, and they couldn't. And that's where I could either create separation or make it hard for them. And that's, I think that's part of what's going on here, is Pog in that initial acceleration is creating a relatively short amount a short amount of space. If Jonas were to punch and get on his wheel right away, the energy cost is going to be much lower than having to cross that gap in the wind by himself. But of course, that's much easier said than done.
Yeah, and I guess we're kind of circling back to the same issue, which is Tadej Pogačar is probably stronger than Jonas Vingegaard, and that was going to become an issue. If it didn't become an issue in the Pyrenees, it was becoming an issue in the Alps, because the Alps are even harder than the Pyrenees, and it was going to happen no matter what. I guess Visma, if you listen to the Lantern Rouge show, both those guys, Patrick Bro is currently a strategic advisor high up for Visma. Benji used to be, and both of them kind of are operating under the assumption that the more you pile on, the more kilojoules you pile on Pogačar, the weaker he becomes. So if you can just like ride so hard the whole day like they did on Sunday, and then ride as hard as you can on the final climb, you don't have to worry about anything that we're talking about, because Pogačar will crack. But where that gets dicey is, and I think with all the Eurosport GCN stuff, maybe Visma didn't know how to watch the Giro. Maybe they didn't watch it. And they didn't know that this guy's amazing now. Because if you watch stage 15 of the Giro d'Italia, I don't think you could reasonably be thinking that, because that was he attacked and threw down like an absolute devastating attack at 7,000 feet with 5,000 kilojoules in his legs and just crushed everybody.
Right.
So I don't know how you could have watched that Giro d'Italia and then still thought that he was somehow weak at the end of hard days at high altitude.
Yeah, I also wanted to note, I mean, you're in France right now. I'm really curious when you get back to Boulder. Also, I'm going to be out in Colorado for SBT. I'm a participant in this event. If any listeners out there are going to be at the event, you can DM me at Hardway Pod. Love to meet up with you, catch a ride, catch some of that Rocky Mountain altitude with you. But I know at my house just yesterday, my son has seen what's going on with equipment at this tour. We have Pog dropping down. I mean, I think he used to be on 172.5 cranks. He's now down to 165s. The guy looks like he's at a Soul Cycle class when he stands up and attacks. So, I mean, my son is 8, and I just dropped him down to 115s from 120 on his bike. I mean, he knows that higher cadence is going to get him the watts he needs out on the driveway. And I'm just curious if people are seeing this out on group rides. I know that where you are in France, most people are sensibly.
Well, did you have to get him a new Stages?
Yeah, well, Stages went out of business. So, I mean, we've got him on an SRM.
You ship it in every year back to Germany to get it calibrated.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. We want it to be as precise as possible because we know that's the gold standard for World Tour teams. And my 8-year-old is going straight to the World Tour next year. Yeah.
Well, he might be. Actually, he's too old. We've actually been we've been on the boards this week. Me and my 4-year-old getting over on the track, and it's a good time, got to say. And we were discussing like, why is it, track racing should be bigger in the US. And I actually don't understand. You go to this velodrome close to our apartment. It's just really simple. It's just a concrete velodrome with a soccer pitch in the middle. Can't be that expensive to maintain or make. It is a little weird to me there's not more of those in the US because you could, like if it's dark or something, it's getting dark earlier, you can go out there and rip an hour on a velodrome, go like 24, 25 miles an hour. That's a fun little workout. Like, I really don't understand why there's not more of them. I'm a big fan. We're going to have to get them down to the Springs when we get back, get them at the USA Cycling Center, maybe some track camps. We'll see how that goes. Hey everybody, it's Spencer. I wanted to tell you about a new partner we have at the newsletter and on the podcast. It's Tour Tracker, the app that lets you track each professional cycling race. It's in the App Store under Tour Tracker, available online on their website, thetourtracker.com. It has completely changed the way I follow races because it gives you super detailed previews of each stage, including interactive profiles and maps, gradients of every climb, as well as live coverage during the race. It tells you who's in what group, where the groups are. It gives you GPS tracking in real time so you can see exactly on the course where they are. It also gives you commentary and live results. It also, this is one of the, when I'm in the US, this is a super valuable feature. It has a time machine race replay that lets you wake up a little bit after the race has started, but you can rewind and see exactly what the race situation was at each point in time. So if you're not waking up at 4:35 in the morning to watch the beginning of every tour stage, this is a great way to do it. It also has a fantasy game built in so you can play against other people that have the app, and a complete set of non-spoiler race notifications before, during, and after each day of racing. My favorite thing about it actually is the map feature. So I'm here in France at the tour in person this year, and if you want to know exactly where they are so you can catch the race, you just look at that map and you can see where they are and where they're going to be. It's also fun to look at when you're at home because it gives you a great perspective of where these races are taking place. So it's not just an abstraction of you're looking at the profile and it, looks one way and then you don't really digest where exactly the race is. So the map is incredible. The group features to see who's in what group and where exactly they are on the course is great. I highly recommend checking it out. You can find it in the App Store, Tour Tracker, or online at thetourtracker.com. Should we talk about how these guys are going this fast? There's been a lot of speculation about, and what I mean speculation, just people saying stuff, because you know what no one has any of is proof. I guess Visma did admit to inhaling carbon monoxide, correct? The deadly gas. Yeah,
the reporting on this, so Escape Collective, I think, had 5 different writers, so there are 5 different people in the byline. It was Royal Flush of Escape Collectives, and the article was a bit confusing. What I gathered from it is they're speculating that people are inhaling, people being specifically Visma, Israel Premier Tech, and Team UAE are the teams that are named in the story. They spoke to the high performance staff from those teams and probably the communications people. The question, it seems the insinuation is that they are inhaling carbon monoxide to change their hematocrit, blood plasma volume, that type of stuff. There's a bit more to it than that, but I believe that is the mechanism, is that inhaling this gas improves your blood numbers.
Well, do you know why it improves blood numbers?
Go ahead. Why?
Because you're dying, because your body is getting so little oxygen, it's suffocating, and it's stressing your body to the point. It's like being at 15,000 feet. So you don't have to actually go up to altitude because your body is so fucking stressed.
Right.
It thinks it's dying. It produces more blood.
But what the article says is, or what the reporting says, is that these teams are doing that on top of altitude training, and now altitude training with heat training. You and I don't think have talked about this. Pog, much better in the heat this year. Everyone in the world is in a Tyvek suit on their trainer with no fans, just dumping buckets of sweat around the world to try to get as fast as possible, because that, of course, increases your blood plasma volume. So it's a way to directly influence your blood numbers. But again, going back to the reporting and the story, the insinuation is these guys are cheating, or they're not cheating. They're in a gray area. They're inhaling carbon monoxide to improve their performance. What the teams are saying is, yes, none of the teams admitted to this. They all said, we have equipment that is measuring the amount of carbon monoxide in people's blood through respiration. So basically, they are breathing into a device to measure those levels. And that's very different. Whether people are inhaling carbon monoxide or not, we don't actually know, but that's what's insinuated.
Yeah, it was kind of like they could do this. In theory, they could do it. I think was the crux of the article, right? Didn't actually say anyone was.
Yeah, like right. Correct. But it's pretty sensational, and it's currently gray area, but legal. So this would be like in the category of, tramadol 6 years ago, something like that. And I think the concern is that this is getting close to actual things that are like blood vector doping. I mean, that's obviously this is not the same thing. This is something adjacent that has a high impact on blood, which is the ultimate doping method, as we know.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to know what's going on, I can tell you, there's no gray area. Like, there's legal and illegal, and everything that's legal being done to go fast by teams that are trying to go fast. Like, frankly, you probably don't want to know what they're doing. It is, some of it, you'd be, oh, that sounds like something that is good, like having faster, like being obsessive with the compounds on your tires or your pressures of your tires, the position. Like they showed a flashback from 2014 at yesterday's stage, and I was shocked at how upright the riders were on the road bikes. And it was like Jack Bauer getting caught at the line. It's like, well, if he wasn't sitting so upright all day, he probably would have won that stage.
It's like he was on a penny farthing. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, where's the time loss coming from? Like, if they are so much more aero now. So it's stuff like that. But, a lot of it is, it's frankly, it would make people uncomfortable. I kind of don't want to say anything. I don't want to cast accusations, but everything is being done to go fast within the rules of the sport. And by rules of the sport, I mean, there's stuff that they don't even think to outlaw, because they don't even think about that people are doing. And I don't know. I find it a little funny that cycling's so obsessed with it. We were even talking off mic where, look at NBA players when they're in college and then look at them 2 years into the pros. They're different people. Their bodies are completely different. Does anyone ask questions how that happens? Look at NFL players. It just, no one seems to question that at all, which I find nice. Like, well, I don't want to know what LeBron James is doing to be playing at such a high level at near 40 years old with his son in the NBA. That's ridiculous. But why do we have to sit unless you have like proof of something's going on? I find it completely pointless to speculate about it. Like what is the point? We're not going to find, unless you have a path to finding out, and that's an interesting story. I just don't think there's any point to it at all. And maybe I'm just being too head in the sand.
Yeah. It seems every time, like the Pog performance the other day, if you go to Blue Sky, Mastodon, wherever you find cycling journalists these days speculating on this stuff, just the watts per kilo speculation. Well, maybe it's not speculation, but looking at the performances of these riders on these climbs, the insinuation is always it starts with this is not normal, and the insinuation is
define normal.
They've got to be doping. Yeah, they've got to be doping. And then there was this. Who was the individual that was on the platform formerly known as Twitter, who had this very long-winded diatribe about what was going on inside Team UAE and how Pog was training before, that he used to only do like 2 15-minute threshold intervals a week. He was riding zone 2 the rest of the time, which I heard some rumors along those lines. Yeah, I have. And does that mean it's true? I don't know, but we more or less have like the cycling equivalent of Q is out there dropping these tidbits of information now and again, and then people are freaking out about like what's going on with Pog.
I mean, I don't want to say too much about it, but I've independently verified some of that information, and that a lot of it is true. A lot of what that person says is spot on. I don't know who they are. I don't know why they're doing that. It's just, if they're as close to Pogačar as they say they are, that bridge is burned at this point. So I don't fully understand what they're doing. I don't know and they seem to genuinely like Tadej Pogačar and want him to do well. So I don't understand what's going on here. But there's been a lot of frustration within Pogačar's camp with his former training plan and the person formulating that training plan thinking that it wasn't the right thing. If he was truly only doing 2 15-minute threshold efforts a week, I understand the frustration, because that's not what he should be doing. And they did hire heat specialists this year. The fact that wasn't done in 2020 is kind of unbelievable. But a lot of that is true. But then on Pogačar, so not normal, whatever, that bothers me a lot, actually. Like, okay, what's normal? Okay, you can't do it, but that doesn't mean someone can't do it. So his FTP, when he's really, really fit, is around like 465, 470 watts. So it's not unbelievable that he could do 447 watts for 39 minutes. That's less than his threshold power for less than an hour. So that's totally normal under the parameters of normal. It's impressive. It's not what I would want to do at the end of a 5-hour stage, do just right under my FTP for that long. But if you're doing he's sub FTP that whole stage. That's what I don't think people fully understand. Like, yeah, if you and I were trying to hang in this group, we would blow up because we would be over our threshold power. But if you're never, like Jonas and Pogačar, are almost never going over threshold at any point during this tour, except when they're attacking each other on these climbs. So I don't know, that seems totally doable to me. It takes a lot of work to get that skinny. It takes a lot of work to get that fit. But, his FTP in the off season is about 431. And the reason this is true, because the guy won Tour of Flanders. Like, to beat riders that big like Mathieu van der Poel, you got to have a massive FTP. To time trial as well as he does, you have to have a massive FTP. So I don't know if he's necessarily raised that so much as just he can go closer to it for longer on demand. I think it was weird. I wouldn't have advised him to say it. He was like, I saw numbers I've never seen before. But that makes it sound like he was looking at his power meter and seeing like 2,500 watts. It's like,
right.
The context would be like, I saw big numbers for longer than I'm used to seeing them for. I think that would be some helpful context.
Yeah, Pog himself in post-race interviews the past couple of stages, like over the weekend, I was watching one of his post-race interviews, and he was talking about exactly that. And he did say, hey, when I joined the team 5 years ago, what we were doing was really primitive. We weren't doing things right. He just described every function of the team as being the opposite of what Team Sky, Team Ineos was at that time. And it sounds like it is hard for me to imagine that with the budget that they had.
They didn't have a big budget, though. They had a small budget when he joined the team.
How small? Are we talking
mid-level?
Intermarché, or are we talking?
No, I think Intermarché might be the lowest budgeted team in this race. Like EF, like middle of the pack.
Okay. All right. So they do have more money now, but it just sounds like some of the basics were not covered. I think it was far below the standard even at the time. And I think that he was talking about this publicly. I do get the feeling that he is aware of the speculation, obviously, and he wants to give a bit of a rationale for what's going on. So he's explaining, hey, when I joined the team, we weren't doing the basic things that would allow me to perform at my highest level and to express my true athletic potential. And now we're doing more of those things. Just look, I'm on 165 cranks.
It definitely has helped his cadence. I mean, I don't know if I would want to go to 165, but Vinigo is on 172.5, which is what I used to ride, and they're the same height. And a lot of this too is just fitness. Like you could tell on stage 15, Jonas was digging for power, going down the cassette, standing up. At that point, that might just be fitness. If he had a full run at preparation, maybe he's spinning just like Tadej is. But it did make me think, though, like maybe he needs to shorten those cranks up, because the spinning that Evenepoel and Pogačar are doing, and it makes the climbing more sustainable. You can do it over and over again, day after day, because it's less stress on your body.
Yeah.
What's the downside? You're like less stable in corners, maybe? It's harder on your knees. Yeah.
Well, you actually, one of the things that's a bit of interesting about it is you do have to raise your saddle. So if you want to maintain the distance between your saddle and your foot when it's fully extended, you do have to raise your saddle a bit. So you are actually increasing you're elevating your center of gravity. So hypothetically, it does make descending and cornering slightly more challenging. It's not a huge amount, but it is something.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I talked to a mathematician about this. Kevin Sulker sent me a breakdown on how it's harder on your knees, because the point, your knees don't come up as much, so it opens your hips. But the point that it has to then like push down on the fulcrum is more force, because the levers are not as long, right? You're shortening the lever, so it's a little bit more force on those knees.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So he's on shorter cranks. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction. So the Norwegian cyclist, Andre, I'm not going to pronounce his last name correctly, probably, but I'm going to read it as Tadej, 25, died Saturday, July 6th at the Tour of Austria. Spencer and I went to the original source material of this. There was an eyewitness account in foreign press, and we did get our hands on the translation of this. So there was a spectator firsthand, saw this incident, and it sounds like Andres was on a tubeless tire. The tire blew off the rim while he was going 60 miles an hour. The spectator said there was white stuff spraying everywhere, and basically his wheel exploded and he died. As a recreational cyclist, this deeply concerns me, and I'm like flabbergasted that we're not seeing more about this in the press after a number of pretty high profile incidents in professional racing this year where riders have been severely injured because tubeless tires have blown off the rim and manufacturers are denying that they're at fault. But pretty clearly, there is a serious safety problem here. And even if there are marginal or even more than marginal gains to be had at the World Tour level to be on tubeless tires on the road, I almost would like to see it mandated that they have to ride on tubulars. It just doesn't seem safe to me that when one of these tires goes flat, it blows off the rim and you're on an exploding piece of carbon fiber in situations where it could be life and death. And this is the kind of thing I'd like to see more attention from the press. And I think we know why they're not writing about it, because they're subsidized through ads. by manufacturers, or they have very close relationships with them, so they don't want to spit in the soup. But this needs to be talked about. It's not safe.
Why do you think this isn't being talked about? Because like big tubeless doesn't want it talked about? Frankly, hookless rims. I accidentally got hookless rims. I just got like Zip. I like Zip. I'm getting some Zips, and been liking them. But I found out they're tubeless, and actually, it is something I've worried about on descents because it's in theory it's safe as long as you don't go over 73 psi. The moment you go over 73 psi, it just blows off the rim, or it no longer has like the ability to hold it. So oftentimes I'll fill it up to like 65, and then I'm like, well, what if it gets a little hot? And then am I at 77? Is it going to pop off the rim? So I do worry about this. I mean, we don't know if he was on. Do we know that he was on hookless or not?
I don't know if he was on hookless or not. It sounds pretty clear to me from the eyewitness account that he was on a tubeless tire. It blew off the rim, and there was sealant spraying everywhere.
And I guess that could be from like, let's say he rode over a nail, and then it loses pressure. And then the problem with the tubeless tire is once it loses pressure, it's going to come off the rim. This happened to Derek G at Paris-Roubaix 2 years ago, before anyone who knew who Derek G was. He was in the breakaway. He punctures on one of the cobbles in the Armberg Forest, and then he keeps riding, but the tire comes off the rim, and he's just riding on the bare rim over the Armberg Forest. Yeah. So that just is an illustration of what happens when a tubeless tire loses pressure. This probably wouldn't have happened with a sew-up, but someone wrote in and said, it's ridiculous. You guys keep talking about sew-ups. That war's been lost, and it is all tubeless all the time now. But but these I've been thinking about hookless a lot. I'm borderline like paranoid about it, where I'm thinking like, God, like, and if you put the wrong tire on, it's like I'm not at home. I don't have my home bike shop. What if I just go and buy a tire? I don't fully understand what the person at the bike shop is saying. I toss it on, and then it's like, oh, just a little byproduct of that, you could die. It's like, well, that seems a little, how did we get into this? And I guess they're just cheaper to produce for the manufacturer, so they want to produce hookless rims, and then in theory they're slightly stronger, but just seems like the margin for error is so low on how you can run it, and then the risk, or like what is at stake is so high, because if you're descending, you really don't want your tire to come off the rim.
No, you really don't. And flattening clinchers, and I've flattened clinchers on downhills at high speed before. I never had a clincher come off of my rim.
Well, probably because it was hooked on, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've had the same thing. I've flatted. I mean, I know you're going through a particular type of hell right now with these head Ardennes rims.
Oh, God.
I've flatted multiple times on those, and they're so tight. I've gotten home before I've even realized I've had a flat, because it refuses to let the tire come off the rim. So that is a benefit of having a hook on that rim.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a situation, maybe they've corrected the problem now, but we're talking about a set of head Ardennes Plus or Belgium rims that I have. They're tubeless, and this is no exaggeration. It's been so hard to get them off that my fingers have bled trying to remove these tires. And I have anybody who's going to write in and say, well, like, you need the tire jack thing. I've got all the special tools to get these things off of my rim. The last time I took a tire off, I had to find a way to cut the bead of the tire I was removing, which was not easy. And I have written to Head. If anyone from Head is listening, and if you can explain to me how to get a tire on one of your rims, I would love to hear about it. So you can DM me at Hardway Pod, because there are nice wheels. I just am unable to get tires on them to use them.
Yeah, the shame is that they are incredible wheels.
Yeah, they're really nice wheels, but they're almost impossible to get a tire on or off of. So I'm gonna have to slide in a minute to go continue to disrupt an industry and build the better lab. Question I have for you: I saw Chris Horner was talking yesterday about some scenarios where he believes Jonas can actually still win the Tour, barring a fast follow COVID infection for Tadej. I mean, people do actually sometimes get rebound COVID, so that's not a completely implausible scenario. I was just kind of making a joke there, but now that I think about it, I do know some people who have had rebound COVID before. it could actually happen. I don't think that's going to happen. Do you see a scenario where Jonas somehow pulls a rabbit out of the hat and beats Pog?
I don't. And if it wasn't Chris Horner, I'd laugh at the suggestion. But he also had a video after Jonas crashed being like, I think Jonas can do the tour. And I was like, I don't know about that, man. That seems a little far-fetched. So who am I to doubt Chris Horner at this point? But, he's not down that far. If you didn't watch any of the race and I just told you what happened this spring, that Tadej did the Giro, and you looked at the standings, you'd say 309. That's not bad. Not a bad gap. Was Tadej going to get tired in the third week? If he's on the same level he was in the Pyrenees, obviously there's no chance because you're not going to ride faster than he was. You can't do it. But if he gets tired, then it's a kind of a lame analysis. If he gets tired, he might not be as fast and you could go faster than him. But I'm sure that's what Beesma's thinking. Like, people have bad days. It happens. Tadej has bad days. We've seen it happen. And you have a final time trial. Do we remember any tour that looks like it was shut, like a shut case, and then the final time trial rolls around and someone pulls back some time and wins? It's not impossible. Like, what if Tadej flats in that final time trial? What if he crashes? It's definitely not impossible. It seems improbable based on the fact that we have plenty of data of every time the road goes uphill, one rider is stronger than the rest, and that is Tadej Pogačar, and the rest of the course is mountain stages. So going by that, it would seem to be somewhat hopeless, but we don't know how his body's going to react. The Giro Tour double is hard for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
All right, speed round here. Pidcock at the Olympics. Do you still see him winning a gold medal in mountain bike?
Oh, yeah. And I like it even more that he got COVID. I love that he got COVID. Get him out of the tour.
Yeah.
He got a nice little 2-week training camp. He's probably working on the mountain bike right now. He's going to crush that race. Speed round for you, sprint deviations. Should we care?
Oh, all right. I had this on my list. This was a note that I had. I just want to see Jasper Philipsen win. I mean, the sprint yesterday, he didn't need to deviate from his line and rapidly dive to the left. There was no door to shut. He was going to win the sprint. Just go in a straight line, man. People don't like you. Stop.
It does yes, I agree with you. And he did come over Ackerman. Mitch Docker actually pointed this out. Good eye, Mitch. On stage 13, I believe, he slices right in front of Ackerman, who has to brake. And then, he probably wins anyway, but it's just that, that is a big advantage. Going back and watching Unchained, it actually makes him and Van der Poel come off much worse than I thought they did the first time, especially having seen this tour where he just consistently break the rules or abuse the rules and then complain when they're punished and then laugh about it when it goes in their favor. Like, they're laughing after Van der Poel gets relegated for the headbutt or for the push, saying like, basically they can't do anything to stop us. And we've figured out a way to just break the rules every time and they can't punish us every time. So yeah, I'm becoming less and less of a Philipsen fan by the day, while acknowledging the man is very fast in a straight sprint. Just go straight.
Yeah, they're kind of the Bash Bros of sprinting now. It's like McGuire and Kid Seiko minus the PEDs in a sprint. That's kind of
yeah.
That's kind of what I see going on. Yeah,
like the most likable. It won't happen because Biniam had a good intermediate sprint today. But if he wins that green jersey after Biniam crashes, like, who outside of Philipsen's family will be happy? That would not be awesome.
Yeah, that's true. I will say this in Van der Poel's post-race interview, and Philipsen actually was the same. I mean, they both said, yeah, we want to win the green jersey, that we don't want to win it because somebody crashed. Like, that's actually, we don't want to win that way. So I was like, you know what? That's sporting. I like that. So I do want to see him ride in a straight line, though. Just one more thought on that sprint. Our main man, Jonas Abrahamsson, going full Stuart O'Grady, headbutting. I haven't seen a headbutt in a sprint in quite a while. It seems like they just started DQing everybody who headbutts. The Aussies, of course, were famous for it. McEwen, Stuart O'Grady both had quite a few famous headbutts in their day. So we see Abrahamsson headbutting to get to the front, and then he just gives the perfect lead out to the full Alpecin lead out train. do you think he should have done something different there? I mean, his team, I'm not sure what else his team could have done. They're not going to like get in the middle of that Alpecin lead out train, but I guess Alpecin would have they would have had more time in the wind.
Yeah.
Riders who preceded Philipsen, and that would have diminished their chances of winning. Also, I want to acknowledge, because I've seen comments from some other pundits about things that should happen in the final seconds of sprints. If you've done any kind of sprinting, even at a low level, part of what these people have to do is be able to make decisions during an extremely physically and mentally intense moment. But it's all unfolding so rapidly. Like the idea that Abrahamson's like going to look back in the middle of being full gas at the end of the stage, do some move to, I don't know. I just don't know if that's actually possible.
Yeah, I think the idea was that his team was supposed to be on his wheel. And if you go back to one of the last roundabouts, Alpecin just kind of gets in there. What you're supposed to do, you're supposed to sit up in that case, because what happened was not only was he giving Alpecin a lead out, he was burying his own guys. So his guys are stuck behind Alpecin and they can't move up because his pace is so high that you're just stringing it out and hurting your own teammates, inhibiting their ability to move up. So it's not ideal. You know, you're like, what? I'm just going to sit up and blow this lead out that I could be giving. But he, as you say, he just kept Alpecin from hitting the front too early and pinned his own riders back, which is never ideal. But he would probably say, well, they were supposed to hold my wheel. What the heck happened? I was doing my job. What happened behind? But I guess that's when you're Alpecin. You're throwing elbows back there. No one wants to fight you off a wheel.
Yeah, and if you go back maybe 2K in that sprint, and if it's worth going back and watching it, just Magnus Cort had a perfect ride. He just continually was shutting the door on people who were trying to move up on his left and right as they were going through a series of chicanes, not in a dangerous way. He wasn't deviating from a line, but he was riding properly to maintain position for Uno X in a moment when I think it was Alpecin, like continually was trying to push up, and he just was positioning himself without deviating on the road in such a way that they couldn't do it. It was brilliant riding.
Yeah, it was really impressive. And at the end of the day, though, are they happy with that third? Yeah, it's not the worst result in the world for a wildcard team. Stacking up stage podiums, some points. Magnus Cort, the last thing I'll share before I go, I knew that the hotels at the tour weren't like the nicest in the world. He does a daily tour, like hotel review. And maybe they're getting the short end of the stick because they're a wildcard invite. Holy smokes, are these bad hotels? Like, I'm sitting in a €100 a night Ibis lobby recording this podcast. It is a very fine hotel, like lovely. How are they not able to book? And I bet ASO is booking hotels like this and sticking non-riders in them. You know, they're probably sticking their own employees in them. And then the high level employees are probably at the closest 5-star hotel. It is shocking the level of hotels that they're staying at. I have to say I've been absolutely blown away by it. And like some of these people, like, what do you think Christoph is making? That man is making a lot of money. He could go book his own nice hotel. He's not allowed to. You have to stay in the right crap hole that they book for you. It's really ridiculous.
Well, yeah. And Ineos had a video drop 2 days ago about their team. They have employees, and the only job of these employees, which is a substantial job, just logistics, and they're moving riders' luggage. They're doing shopping for the team staff. And if you didn't know this, the very top tier teams, well, I don't know if I would put Ineos in that category, but the teams with the biggest budgets. Yeah. So like Ineos, Jumbo, I believe EF does this as well. They have a truck with mattresses for each rider. And they're going in, they're yanking the mattresses out of the hotel room, and they're putting the mattress for each individual rider along with a pillow for each rider. So it's their preferred
and
pillow,
air conditioning.
And air conditioning.
Which is huge.
And I mean, the thing that's hilarious is these custom mattresses. It's like a twin bed mattress.
Well, these beds, man, the big beds have not made it over the Atlantic yet.
Yeah.
I will say.
It's like medieval surf size beds. Yeah.
In this case, it's really helpful. It's actually, I think that's one of the smartest things Ineos does because, I mean, as you know, sleep is important. And new mattresses every night must be so bad for your sleep. Even if they're quote unquote nice, just the different consistency, it makes it really hard to get a consistent night of sleep.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this on a previous podcast, but there are a lot of studies around what's called the first night effect. So humans are just programmed to have a higher level of vigilance, and you're going to have greater cognitive activity, and it's going to be more difficult to sleep the first night you're in any new location. If you think about this from an evolutionary biology and psychology point of view, completely makes sense. You know, if you were in a new location, you had no idea what was out in the forest that might get you, what other tribes might do. So you had to be more alert, wake up more easily in case you needed to defend yourself or run, like whatever might have to happen. And that has not gone away. So the first night you're in a new location, it's more difficult to sleep. If you're doing it all the time, as these athletes are, it probably gets a bit easier, but it's something that's hardwired into us. So it's challenging. And fancy things like mattresses are things that can help people get better sleep. But at the end of the day, there are a core set of foundational practices that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, they're relatively easy to do. And there are also things that a lot of people neglect to do. So those are the things that can actually help have the biggest impact. And that's what the Better Lab helps you to do. So check us out. Find the Better Lab in the Apple App Store. Download it. Tell me what you think.
I will say, after having been to the tour, it would make a lot of sense for riders to sleep in their own camper vans. I actually don't know why they can't do that. But Dave Brailsford's idea that every rider would have their own camper van starts not to work or make any sense. Like, so there's 200 camper vans. Like, where are they parking? Like, I don't know if that makes it. Maybe we put 4 people in a single camper van.
It's got to be. I mean, just look at the roadside. Like, there's enough road space out there.
Where are they flushing? Where are the toilets getting?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Also, it also has made me respect the amount of money. Holy smokes, to drive these things around. Did you know gas is like $10 a gallon here? Can you imagine what it costs to fill up one of these buses? In just the trucks? It's actually staggering. What it costs to fill up the team cars to drive behind the Peloton all day. It's really staggering, the cost the burden that must be for the teams, that you don't really appreciate when you're driving around filling up at the old Freedom gas stations in the US for 25 cents a gallon or whatever it is currently. But Andrew, we'll let you go. I'm going to watch this cracking battle between Simon Yates and Richard Carapaz at the front of this race.
Yeah.
And I'm actually going to Nice tomorrow to be on the ground for the last few days. So I will check in with you from there. That's
amazing. And you mentioned the gas budget. I just imagine what the bucket hat budget is for the tour, and the high fashion cost as well.
It's backbreaking. Actually, I was thinking, because they throw these bucket hats out, and there's seemingly an endless supply. I'm like, who is in charge of sourcing these? Like, does their job start August 1? Source them for next year? Like, there's a factory in Thailand just pumping out bucket hats, Skoda bucket hats. I've been given specific instructions about the remaining hats we need to grab from the caravan before we complete our collection. So I will be fully dialed in on the polka dot bucket hat and the yellow LCL cycling cap. And then we will have all the caps from the tour. So I am locked in on that, and that's my main goal.
Amazing.
I'm going to ride the Final Time Trial, and we can talk about it if you have time in a podcast.
Yeah,
before
absolutely.
The Final Time Trial.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We have to let you go. I've forgotten the sign out. We have to let you go. You have industries to disrupt and something. We'll dig that back out and get the rust off that. But thank you for joining us, and we will talk soon.